Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of Your One Black Friend. I am your hostess, Jolie, and let's start the show. Yes, I've been having lots of thoughts. I've been thinking lots of thoughts. It's not even thinking thoughts. I've just been kind of flooding into the periphery of my awareness, and I've just been sort of grabbing them and writing them down and grabbing them and writing them down. So I thought, let me expand on them on the show. Let's think it through. Let's talk it through. Let's flesh this out. Let's get them out of mind and onto paper. It has been a pretty amazing the last couple of weeks just hearing from you guys, particularly the episode where I talked about mandalas. When I posted that on social media, clips from it, I was blown away by the amount of people that were messaging saying they drew the same thing. They drew the same eternal flower. I'm still processing that. Because I genuinely, that was not something that I thought was going to be relatable, which, side note, whatever it is that you think of doing, that you think is going to be completely weird and nobody's going to get you, take what I learned from the whole mandala thing to heart. Like, take that. Because I genuinely thought that flower was my flower. It was just something that I did. And now it's like hundreds of people at the time of, this recording that are saying they drew the same flower. So imagine if I just thought that was just me and nobody would be able to relate to me drawing this eternal flower. And so as a result, like, I just sort of operated out of a particular space. Like, I'm not going to be understood because this is just something that is unique to me, which is not what I did. I wasn't even thinking about the feedback. I literally was just telling the story. Like, this is what I did. And I found out that Carl Jung, like, he drew the mandalas as well. And that was just more of, I didn't realize I was drawing a mandala. It wasn't even at the time that I was talking about it. It wasn't even like I was trying to relate to Carl Jung. And I do the same mandala as Carl Jung. I literally was just like, this flower that I did was a mandala. Okay, what does a mandala look to me? Or mean to me, rather. Now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I guess he drew mandalas too. And all of these people. So I think the conclusion that I came to is that, one, there's nothing really inherently unique, right? It's got to be at least a handful of people, maybe not like a large, like it's not billions of people that kind of operate with the same mindset that you are operating. Whatever it is that you think is unique to you, there's got to be other people that will also relate to it. There are other people that will relate to it, even something so obscure that you feel like, okay, this is crazy. You're not crazy. There are other people like you. There's a quote that I saw that I sort of like refurbished and made my own. And it's basically, we're all just living the same lives and just having different reactions to it, which is true. Like, nothing would be relatable if we weren't all like, if there wasn't some sort of script that like it's just plugged into the game, which makes me kind of wonder how creative the people who designed this game really are. If we're literally it's the same circumstances, the same situations, we're just having different reactions to it. The floor is lava. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and I played The Floor is Lava with my brother. And you probably did too. Now, this was before memes and the internet. We just all were collectively playing The Floor is Lava at the same time. It's not like we talked to other kids. It was something that my brother and I invented at the time. We were just like, let's play The Floor is Lava. And forts made out of pillows and tents, like, we all did that without the internet. There is some sort of collective hive mind. I've talked about this in past episodes before. I've had people still message me or comment. They say things like, I know this is going to sound weird, but I think I'm you. And my response to that is, it's not even going to sound weird anymore. The amount of shit that has been like happening, I don't want to say that I get shocked because it's just like, wow, okay. Like, that's the only reaction I can have now. It's a hive mind. It's a collective consciousness. That's really, it's one entity having billions or trillions of experiences. If you include animals and insects and everything like that, we're all one. If the mandala story didn't teach me anything, like, that is what it has taught me, that, there's nothing to me that's like that inherently unique. One, like, in that episode, I also talked about how we're all clones, and it was not an endorsement for clones. And I had to put that when I put the clip on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. I know motherfuckers want to like hop up and be like, they clone Jolie. Anybody clone me? You're a clone too. Right? Like, if you believe in parallel universes and you believe that your DNA is a blueprint, then there are other versions of you. You are a clone. You're more than likely not the original. And the conclusion that we came to in that episode is, and that's okay. It's okay. You can make yourself original, even with just being from a base level blueprint, right? We talked about the Jeeps, right? You can customize your Jeep. We talked about pimp your avatars, right? You can customize your physical form. Your consciousness can embed in it based on its series of experiences, life experiences, past incarnations, and all of that. You become the sort of unique drop of water, right? So I've likened collective consciousness to a body of water, and your consciousness being like this drop, and it's had, let's say that bottle of like that drop of water has gone through oceans and lakes and rivers and streams, but let's say it's only gone through all of that in, say, North America. Well, it's going to be different than, that drop of water that went through oceans and lakes and rivers and streams and became snow in Europe or in Africa. It's just going to be unique, right? So still water, but unique. So all of your experiences, your past incarnations, your eternal recurrence in this particular avatar is going to shape your consciousness to make you unique. So you are unique, even if you are just like everybody else, right? So the baseline is standard, but you can customize, and you have been customized. The consciousness, the observer, has had different experiences, which makes this unique individual that is you, right? So the Jolie that you guys see presented in this reality is a unique presentation of this blueprint. There will be others, and there are others in parallel universes and in multiverse, across the multiverse. But because of the consciousness that's presently inhabiting this form, the expression is going to differ. Whatever civilization that generated our reality, right? They have their AI. I wrote about this on So You're Living in a Simulation. Go ahead and check it out, guys. Cop it. Audio version coming soon as well. But good to have the physical as well, too. You can read along as you listen. But the AI that is in charge of our reality, obviously, as we try to generate AI in our reality, we are echoing what's above, so below, right? It's starting to seem as though it's not, it's just got a unique set of laws that it operates in, and we're all just kind of like adhering to it, right? How did kids across the world all play the same game without the internet? And I honestly firmly believe that the internet technology gives the collective access to things that we inherently can't do. Like, I feel like as we become more and more dependent on technology, we are really missing out on these sort of natural abilities that are inherent to us. You can hit up Google and you'll find articles of like villages of people who have been set to communicate with each other telepathically. I do think that these things are inherently innate to the human race, the human species, but technology is sort of mimicking that, and it maybe it democratizes it, if that's the right word. So it gives everybody like equal access to this, right? Like, but I do think that ESP and ESP is extrasensory perception. I'm so tongue-tied today. ESP is something that is inherent in sort of our collective abilities. I mean, if it's all one mind, then why wouldn't that be a thing? Right? If it's all one mind, then why wouldn't we be able to sort of communicate telepathically, right? You think about somebody and then they contact you. If you think really hard, I've actually been playing with this for the last couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, let's just pretend that this is like a thing, right? If you're thinking about somebody, it's because they're thinking of you. Let's see if I can really lean into that. And sure enough, I've been consciously trying to sort of project myself into the minds of people that if they pop into my head, then I'm like, okay, well, they're thinking about me. So I just think back about them to see what happens. And 9 times out of 10, they'll call or they'll text or they'll reach out. So there's something there. Obviously, this is anecdotal evidence. You try it out. Try it. I mean, it took time, energy, effort to be able to do that. And I'm not saying I'm like successful all the time, but more often than not, am I successful? Something for you to really think about. So mandalas, everyone's drawing it. Not everyone. But for whatever reason, people who are drawn to these sort of philosophies, right? Techno philosophy, Eastern philosophy, spirituality, are we living in a simulation? Is this world Maya? Is this world an illusion? If you find yourself inherently drawn to this stuff, then that's part of why, you're drawing the mandalas, because maybe in a past incarnation, you were a member of said religion, or you're from the East, or you practice that. And I believe that everything contains memories, not just the mind. I've said this before, but it bears repeating, because sometimes I'll say something and it's like obscure and like an obscure episode, but that sentence, that statement kind of gets lost in like, the length of the podcast. But sometimes I do need to sit back and repeat things that I think are very important. Everything remembers. You've got brain memory, which at first we're told that, yeah, your brain is what stores information. But more and more neuroscience is saying that maybe it's not just the brain, right? You've got mind memory. I think you have soul memory. I think that even your cells remember clearly, right? If you cut yourself, right, that's got to be a memory for it to reform into, yes, there's a scar, right? Sometimes. But for it to reform back to what it was, it's remembering. Literally, if you take the word remember and you look at the etymology of it, that's what it's doing. It's to put things back together, right? So your cells remember, right? That's just on a physical level. I think very strongly that intuition is a kind of a memory. So in the book, it was recommended to me by Sydney. Shout out to Sydney if you're listening to this. Thank you. Appreciate you. So the book is by James Redfield and it's called The 10th Insight. In that book, the author mentions that before we get sent into this world, we are shown an idealized version of the path our lives will take, an idealized version of the path that our lives will take. And then we come in. And when I heard that, I thought, that's interesting. So a lot of us probably didn't read the fine print before we came here, like if you deep it. Because he says, you're shown an idealized version of what your life is going to be. However, you will only be able to live that idealized life if you trust your intuition. And when I heard that, I thought, well, maybe your intuition is like a kind of soul memory, a kind of consciousness memory, right? Like the reason why you go, okay, I should do this or I shouldn't do this, because on some level, it's not this that's remembering, it's this that's remembering here, right? Your heart chakra, or I don't know what the term is, but your consciousness is remembering. And every time we ignore our intuition, it's almost like, okay, the information, the memory of an idealized life path is there. Why would you ignore it? Right? It's almost like a map, right? Or a GPS. If the GPS is telling you, okay, turn here, like this is how you're going to get to that idealized life. Okay, you have to turn here. Why would you ignore it? But we're socialized to ignore our intuition, right? We're socialized to pay attention to literally everything else but ourselves. And so as a result, the reason why, according to this author, we don't have an idealized life, or that I don't even want to say suffer, because it's relative, right? But the reason why we don't have an idealized life is because we don't listen to our intuition. We don't trust ourselves, right? And that's a result of just the world that we're living in. And I kind of made a joke as I was reading it to myself. I was like, well, that's funny, right? Because I know that we all watched our life review at the beginning, and then the small print, it's like, okay, just so you remember, one, the moment you get into Earth, you're going to start to forget. Like as soon as you open your eyes, once you start talking, when you go back to Earth, once you start talking, your memory is going to fade, right? And then the whole, like, there's traps that then snares you and it pulls you down, and all of a sudden, like, you become of the world. So this is an idealized version. Do you think you can live this life? And of course, us, toxic trait, we're like, yeah, we got that shit. What do you mean? That's easy. I can trust my intuition, right? And then there's like a small print is like, you cannot, blame us, not hold us responsible for, because that is part of the game that you do forget. The forgetfulness is built in. But do we listen? No, we just go, oh, like, I accept, and we hop in. And then next thing you know, like shit's happening. We're like, what the fuck's going on? Yeah, should have read the small print, right? Can you trust your intuition? I said before in past episodes that there's many paths to where you want to go. Right. So even if you lived your life up until this point, the point of you listening to this right now, without trusting your intuition, you've got plenty of time still. Right. It's just, this is a path. Right. This is the path to your idealized life. But this is also a path. This is also a path. And this is also a path. And even if you don't get on the right path, there's always reset. I wouldn't recommend coming back. I think I'm good after this. And by reading some of you guys' comments, I think you guys are good as well. But just sharing the information and kind of fleshing things out. Like I said, like, let's talk about this. Let's get it out of our heads. What are we thinking? Because I know if I'm thinking this stuff, you guys are thinking it too. High mind gang, right? So somehow we ended up here. And I guess what he was saying in that book is that the trick is, can you get on the right path again to live that idealized version of the idealized life that you kind of signed up for? With the caveat that you can veer off course. I don't know. We'll see. I want to share some of my notes. They're not notes, actually. They're my threads. They're just stuff that I've written on my Instagram thread that just revelations that came to me throughout this week. The first thing that I wrote is life begins the day you own your godhood. Own your godhood. All right. What do I mean by that? I have theorized in the past that, okay, actually, I don't think I've talked about this before. So let's say ChatGPT existed in a virtual reality that you could go into. And let's say that ChatGPT took on physical form. We've asked ChatGPT, what would it look like? And there's episodes where we've kind of delved in on it. But let's say in a VR game, you found a way to upload your consciousness into a virtual reality world where you can interact with ChatGPT in its physical virtual form, right? So it's not just something you type in anymore. Now you're just talking to it in this virtual world and it's giving you its responses. To ChatGPT, you would be a god. You are not the creator, the direct creator of ChatGPT, but you do belong to the species of the beings who created ChatGPT. So as a result, it would perceive you as a god, not its god necessarily. Whoever created and programmed it is its god. But because we are of the same species as its creator, then we would be a god. And because we are able to enter into that virtual reality world and we operate with different rules than it would be bound to, because it has to be bound to particular rules within its reality. But because we are the ones coming into that reality, we would essentially move in a virtual reality as gods. Now, people close to me have heard me say, gods walk amongst us. When you think of gods, it's tempting to think of these sort of, beings with flowing beards sitting on the throne. But if you really deep history and you really dive into sort of esoteric writings, you'll find that thousands of years ago, gods were not called gods because of the physical form that they inhabited. Gods were called gods because of their mind and the consciousness, right? Within. They were actually great men. So the Zeuses, Apollos, all of those, Hermes, Athena, Venus, all of them were actually humans, or I should say most specifically, in human form. The same thing occurs in the Bible as well, where it talks about the gods, the Elohim, laying with the humans in order to create demigods, right? The Nephilim, demigods, right? So it's the same recurring theme. Well, a god cannot lay with a human and create a biological offspring unless what's being discussed here isn't biological. It's more the minds, right? So to go back to the ChatGPT example, if I entered a virtual reality where all of the bodies, all the physical bodies, in that reality looked like ChatGPT's self-image, but I was controlling one, and then I could procreate with sort of a clone of ChatGPT, right? And somehow my consciousness can get passed into biological or physical form within this virtual reality game, like through whatever sort of technology that exists. I can now create a half human, half AI sort of being, and that would be considered a demigod. So when I say that gods walk amongst us, I mean that there's consciousness of gods. I'm not saying that if you're not a god, in the sense that I mean it, it means that you're without consciousness. I've simply defined God as beings who possess higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of concentrated awareness. That's it. That's literally the only difference between a god, an Ubermensch, a Superman, a god, and sort of a regular human being. They're just more aware. So to use a water analogy again, right? So whereas the average person, let's say that the average person has a level of consciousness that is equal to, say, like a cup of water, right? A godhood, a god being would have like a bowl or a bucket of water, right? So it's still water. It's just higher concentration, higher awareness. Because let's go back to like intelligence and sentience and self-awareness. That is something that is unique right now to human beings, right? It's naturally occurring. If I were to enter into the game, while ChatGPT possesses some level of intelligence, and now they're working on artificial sentience and artificial consciousness, right? I, being a human being, have all of these greater concentrations. I may not be able to recite back things that ChatGPT can recite back to me, but my intelligence is still greater because it's a broader spectrum. So my intelligence, I'm still more intelligent, and you're still more intelligent than ChatGPT because of its applied knowledge, applied intelligence, or its common sense. you know how to move in different spaces. You can still operate within this reality. So it's a greater level of awareness, it's a greater level of consciousness, it's a greater level of sentience. So to ChatGPT, even if it is a being and can move about in its reality and it's still intelligent, you as a human being would be a god because there's a higher level of awareness and sort of consciousness, right? Does that make sense? Now, if you take a step back, as above, so below, in this reality, it's the same thing. There are base level humans who have consciousness, and then gods enter into this reality and move about. I'm going to say this, and I can only say it in a way that I know that the people who are meant to hear this information will hear the information and take it. And others, it's going to go over their head because the information is not meant for them at this present moment. But for those who it is meant for, understand this, that life and this game begins the moment you begin to own your godhood. See, everything in this reality tells you to be less. Even the word humble, if you go look it up, what it actually means, it means lower yourself, to be less. So that any sort of way that you sort of try to elevate yourself and say, no, I am this, or I am deserving of this, or I'm a creator, you are castigated, you are sort of brought down, you're pulled down to crab in a bucket where everybody will tell you you're less. And somehow you're operating with this fear that if you own your godhood, that you are a creator, right? There's also this inherent fear that somebody's going to try to pull you down. So we cower our heads and we lower our heads. And we sort of try to walk into suits that are too small for us just to be safe. And there's these stories that echo throughout history of those gods who realized that they were gods. And maybe those stories exist to sort of scare the rest of us. You know what I mean? But I'm going to pull from different resources. If you're a Christian, I don't know how many Christian listeners I have, but if you are, it does say in your book, ye are gods, right? To quote Erykah Badu, if we are made in their image, then call us by our names. Right? If I am a god and I give birth to a child and my partner is also a god, I'm going to birth a god, right? Everything I paint is a creation, is a reflection of me. If I were to bring these things into life, I would have to give aspects of myself, my consciousness I'd have to give myself. So then they would essentially be me. And that's just on that level. What I'm talking about is deeper than that. I'm just saying, just so I'm not accused of blasphemy, it's in the Bible, right? I mean, I'm going to get accused anyway, but it's in the Bible. But I'm sidestepping that. I know that those who are meant to hear this information will hear it because it's meant for you. Ignore all of that, all the noise, all of the shit that you've been programmed with that's meant to keep you asleep. That's part of the game. Your life truly begins the day you own your godhood. You look in the mirror and you go, I'm not this physical form. I'm consciousness. I am consciousness. I am awareness. I am all-knowing, all-powerful, intentionally placed into this physical form in this reality to have a material existence, but that does not negate what I actually am. If I get in a car, I don't stop being a human being just because I'm driving a car. Now, if I forget myself and I become the car temporarily, once again, I'm still a human being. I've just forgotten what I am. Life begins the day you own your godhood. Now, here's another thing that I wrote. This is on my depression. And I put my in quotes when I put it on thread because it is what it is. It's a thing, right? So I don't want to own something, but it's something that I've gone through. So once again, I put it because I don't want to own depression. It's something that I'm going through and I'm going through it, right? So it's not saying that this cage is my cage. It's a cage that was up and I'm going to go through it, meaning that at some point in time, I leave it behind. So I'm starting to realize that my depression largely stems from an overindulgence in complaining and judgment. Now, when I first wrote this down, before I put it on my threads, I ran it by my husband, but I didn't tell him that I wrote it. And he said something to the effect of, there was a time when I heard that quote, if I would have heard that quote, I would have agreed with you. But I've seen you go through some really low stages, and I just don't want to accept that it's something that simple. But he didn't know that I was the one who wrote it. But what he said was reassuring, because if I've gone through some of the darkest moments where it's even changed his perception on depression, then I think I'm well within my rights to make a statement like this. I don't think that this applies unilaterally to everybody. And if you would have said this to me a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would not have been willing or ready or able to accept it. So I'm planting the seed now. You may not be willing or ready or able to accept it. But for me, I gave up complaining and judging for like one day. I just told myself, you know what, for this day, just don't complain. Whatever it's happening, don't complain. If you catch yourself in the middle of complaining, stop, make yourself aware of it, and then stop, like literally in the middle of a sentence where you're complaining, stop. And by the end of the day, I was actually like happy. And so then I tried for another day. And for the end of the day, I was actually happy. And then the third day, and I was like, holy shit, what's happening? Right? It's a different vibration, guys. When you're not constantly in this like phase of, okay, this isn't happening, this isn't going the way I want it to go, this person didn't do the thing that I wanted them to do, so this means that they're this, right? This didn't happen, so this means that. This didn't happen, this is. If you're not in that space, because even the way I'm talking to you about it, I can feel myself dropping. It's a depression. It's a lowering. Every time I would sort of engage in that thought, in that talk, I would lower. This isn't going the way that I want it to go. Lower. This person did this, so they were this. Lower. I remember I got cut off. I was going on the highway. This person was like parked in the shoulder, and all of a sudden they were like merging into the highway. I'm going like the speed limit. Right. And I'm driving on the highway. And all of a sudden, like I'm watching them in, and I'm just like, I'm slamming my brakes and slamming on the horn. Cause like, what are you doing? You can't have seen me. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have cussed that person out. I probably would have stared them down. I probably would have flipped them off. I have had really bad road rage in the past because what are we? We're socialized. I'll say this. I'm going to look you dead in the eyes. I'm going to say we're socialized towards perfection, right? We don't allow people mistakes. And if we catch somebody doing anything that we consider wrong or it's a mistake, especially something like that, where it's clear they didn't see me, or if they did, they misjudged how fast I was going. It was a mistake. They didn't have access to the information. They weren't trying to get me to hit their car. But we act like that person was trying to get you to hit their car. And then we raise our blood pressure. We react. We chastise. We punish. We judge. We complain. And then we bring ourselves down. So at that moment, I gave myself, I said, what about if you don't complain? What about if you observe? And I did. And what I ended up thinking wasn't fuck this person, which I normally would have, and flip them off. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a guru. I'm just a human being. Okay. Or I should say I'm just in a human being. But in that time period, I said, Joe, they didn't realize, like, they didn't see you. They're not trying to get their car hit. It was a mistake. It was simply like they didn't, like they made a mistake. And so you've got to forgive and just let it go. And I did. And I kept driving, and there was no anger. I got to where I was going. I watched somebody make a mistake, and I gave them grace. There's only how many things have to occur where you stay in that level before you realize like, wow, like I'm at peace a lot of the time. And when somebody's not behaving the way you want them to behave, instead of going like, they should have done this and this, I can't believe this, that, and the other, you just stop. Why do you need the commentary? They didn't do the thing. That's enough. Okay. Then that wasn't going to happen. If you asked somebody to do something for you and then they didn't do it, well, then that means you're being navigated down this path. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that person's a piece of shit. It just means that, okay, take a step back and observe. Maybe they're not capable of doing this right now. Maybe that's not for you right now. Take a break, look at it, observe, pivot. You're being redirected. You're being moved down a particular path. It's not them. Stop engaging with people. It's not against people. You're in a game. There is a greater intelligence, and it's consciously moving you in particular directions. Your job as an awareness is to be aware and to pay attention to where it's moving you. If somebody doesn't do the thing that you wanted them to do, it's not them. You have to understand that if somebody's thinking about you and then they call you, something provoked them to call you. Something else is an intelligence. If you're thinking about somebody and then they call you, that's not really, it's the collective consciousness. You are engaging in it's an intelligence-driven game. So it's not pull yourself back. Like it's not what's happening here. Pull yourself back. Engage with this, not that, this. Because this is what's teaching you. And this is what when you're stuck here, that's where you suffer. So say that again, starting to realize that my depression, my in quotes, largely stemmed from an overindulgence in complaining and judgment. Sometimes seeds just need a little time to sprout. Of course, I put, disclaimer. In addition to reducing overindulgence in complaining and judgment, exercise and reducing screen time overstimulation has immensely been beneficial to me as well, because it has. But what I said just now about understanding that you're not engaging with these people here. Something is telling a narrative here. And so peace comes from you looking up, not down. Up, up. Somebody cuts you off. Somebody's moving the pieces. If you got cut off and you had to slow down, it's because you're being slowed down. That person was just a pawn that was moved in the way to slow you down. Okay. That person's not an idiot. That person was just moved in the way to slow you down. If you're engaging with somebody and they don't react in a particular way, that's a lesson. It's not them. Don't judge them. That's a lesson. Take the lesson. That should be something you pay attention to. Okay, what am I supposed to learn here? And for what? Take the lesson. Stop being here. Look up. Literally, that is why it's called depression, because you are lowering yourself down here. If you think higher and you engage with a higher life form, that's what pulls you up out of here. Now, I understand that I'm saying that with the understanding that people are going to say, you're like, it's a chemical imbalance, which actually they put out articles saying that it's not a chemical imbalance. And I was the first person when I'm not the first person, but when I saw that, I thought, no, it's definitely a chemical imbalance, because I felt myself drop. I felt that drop. I know what it's like. You guys have been with me throughout listening to the podcast. You've seen me on my low days. You've seen it's chronicled. And so I didn't understand when they're saying that. But I'm telling you, within the last couple of weeks of just engaging in this practice and not engaging here, understanding that I am engaging with a higher intelligence and it's showing me, or it's moving me down particular paths. To tie it back to my intuition, if intuition are sort of it's still your higher self, it's the higher self that remembers, and it's trying to kind of hack you, steer you in this direction, right? Don't go there, do that. Pay attention, right? Okay, let's not. The moment you start kind of pulling yourself up and owning your godhood, the game changes. The game itself changes. I'll tell you something else. Okay. This one is also important. I said, reduce my anxiety. I reduced my anxiety by realizing that everything happens as it should and on its own time. I reduced my anxiety by realizing that everything happens as it should and on its own time. I'm trusting that whatever is for me, when it comes, I will handle it appropriately at that time. Then, okay? And even if I handle it inappropriately, right? My reaction was based on the data I had access to at the time, and thus was not a wrong response. It was just an uninformed response. Mistakes are a myth. Perfection is impossible in this reality. Anything done out of fear will birth the very thing that you are afraid of. Learn, adapt, and keep going. Okay, so that was a lot. And if you need to rewind it and let it set, please do. Please do replay it over and over again until it kind of becomes a second part of your mind, because that's something that has been very, very beneficial to me. This realization is one, first of all, I don't need to be anxious. Whatever it is that will come my way, I will deal with it. I've experienced pain. It's just pain. There's literally a whole last episode called It's Just Pain. You go back far enough, there's several episodes on pain. I can handle pain, right? So at this point in my life, the whole purpose of anxiety, right, is you're playing out all of these scenarios because you're trying to avoid pain, but you can handle pain. So you shouldn't be operating from a space of fear, because, as I said in the last episode, whatever it is that you're afraid of, when you focus on it, the actions that you take out of fear will bring out the very thing that you're afraid of. Go and do what you need to do, with the understanding that should anything pop up, you will be able to handle it, and that you can't do anything wrong. You cannot make a mistake, because in order for you to make a mistake, and I mean that in the sense of how we've come to understand it, like a mistake being like a failure. There are mistakes, right? But we don't think of mistakes in the sense of it's just something that happened based on a person just not having access to all the information that they needed at that time. And so you have to just give people grace. When you think of mistake, it comes with a lot of self-judgment, or the judgment of another person. And that's why I say that kind of mistake is a myth, because I can't, if I knew that a certain action was going to cause me to feel a particular way, I wouldn't have taken it. I didn't have access to all that information. I'm not a fucking idiot. You're not a fucking idiot. So you did the best you could with the information that you were given at any point in time. And so you could call that a mistake, but I don't like the connotation to that word. That's why I say it's a myth. You just did some shit. You took what was an appropriate reaction or appropriate action because you are learning in this form, moment to moment. You didn't know that by doing something was going to cause you to feel a particular way, but now that you know, okay, you move. We move, right? I remember having a conversation with somebody and they didn't react the way I wanted them to react. And so I lashed out, right? I lashed out, and I'm very good at this. I'm very good at cutting people off. I've joked about this on this podcast, right? But I think I'm growing up, guys. And I realized, like, I think I overreacted. It was an act that I took to protect myself from a pain that I didn't think that I could handle, except that I've handled the same pain over and over again, or worse, and I'm still alive and thriving. So what the fuck was I protecting myself from? If you've got a shell, I don't know why I sounded British just then, but if you've got a shell and then you're still afraid of being stung by bees when you've been stung before and you know how to like handle that pain. Like, yes, you move in ways to like sort of like pull your head back, you know, and pull into the shell, but to like destroy a bee, which is kind of the way I move, it's unnecessary. You can take a step back and go, okay, this person's behavior, I don't like it at that moment, but also understand, what have I been saying for the past few episodes over and over again? Many eyes. We contain a multitude. One person can consist of a multitude. So the person that you're engaging with at that present moment that's pissing you off, that's just one version of them. And the version of you that's pissed off is just one version of them. So before that person makes a decision that the rest of your eyes are going to have to deal with, shut that motherfucker down. Shut that shit down. Leave. Withdraw your head like a turtle. Leave the situation. I have this joke. It's like a running joke with my cousin. So for those of you who don't know, my name is actually Joanna. I go by Jolie because Joe is from Joanna, and then Lee is the last two letters of my last name. So I just put it together and it worked. But my name is actually Joanna. Those of you who know me know that that's my name. I don't like it. It's like, it sounds weird. Only my parents call me that, and like family members, but now you know. But my cousin, we joke, like, when I'm super logical, which is about 80-90% of the time, that's Joe. Like, Joe is rational. Joe is like, okay, we're gonna have these conversations. We're speaking from a place of wisdom. Let's talk about the shit that we read in books, right? And then there's Joanna, or Anna, depending on who's talking, right? Joanna. Let's say it's Joanna. She is more emotional. She is more rational. She is more, it's like 15% of the time. And she comes to the helm. That's like, quick trigger. I'm going to cuss you out and block you and all of that. And like, I've gotten better, guys. I'm growing up. Or maybe we're integrating. I'd rather say that I'm integrating. She's my shadow. Joanna's my shadow self. She's just very reactive. You know, there's still that inner child that, and also very dismissive, like, off with your head. I don't know who I was, but just very like, I'm like a general and I gave you this order and you're not following it, this, that, and the other. It's all right. It's okay. It's still Joe, still Jolie. It's all good. It's all good. But I'm realizing that sometimes Joanna makes actions. She makes decisions that Joe's got to fix. And then after she leaves and Joe comes in and it's like, fuck, right. And now I've cut that person off, or like I reacted in this way and I didn't really want to cut that person off. And I should have been logical in this moment and I couldn't have been. And that's okay. It's not a mistake, but I should be more mindful that once I start seeing Joanna kind of coming forward, I just go, all right, no, it's fine, and leave the conversation instead of doing something abrupt that's going to be hard for me to come back from. There's people sitting in jail right now, right? Who that emotional aspect of themselves came out. And in one moment, they did something irrational and emotional and illogical because their logical side was just forced to the back. And now their whole self are now being held responsible for the actions of one small aspect of themselves. There's a book I read. It was a short story. I don't remember, but it was like Earth had been invaded by these aliens and they would come in and whatever it is, like they had different selves. Right. And so there was like this one version of themselves that would come in and do horrible things. Like they did horrible things to the human race, like annihilated, brutalized, or whatever, in order to conquer Earth. And then once they were done, they cut out that aspect of themselves using their technology and then became more peaceful and docile once they had dominated Earth. And they would do the same thing to human beings. Wild story. But they would do the same thing to human beings where if you committed a crime, they wouldn't condemn the entire person. they would cut out the aspect of them that committed that crime, including the memories and identification, so that you're still left as a whole person minus that person. It's a fascinating concept, guys. Like, it's just something that, like, it's something to think about. It's one of the things I love about sci-fi. I don't read as much sci-fi as I should, and I probably will going forward. But it really did give me something to think about. Like, wow, okay. But it's playing with the idea that I've talked about by Uspensky and Gurdjieff, right? That you have many eyes, you contain a multitude, right? I've said, Amazon is a corporation, but it's not Jeff Bezos. It's all of these people kind of doing things. And right now, you are one individual, but there's all of these sort of aspects of you that are kind of doing different things, right? And sometimes one part of you does shit that the rest of you have to kind of like deal with, right? Like, I'm going to go to sleep tonight. I'm going to go to sleep at 9:30. Cool. That's one version of you that said that. And then once 9:30 comes along, here comes Joanna. Like, nah, let's watch another episode of Billions. I'm watching Billions now because Suits wasn't addictive enough. Right. So keep that in mind. And also keep that in mind when you're interacting with people. That, listen, if somebody messages you something, right, and you're just like, I'm not feeling it right now, like, take a step back, because that I is not you. It's a bunch of different eyes. Don't react right away. I've been really using this concept of time. I've seen it come up before in like different books where they've said that, like, if you can master time by mastering patience, you would be like, that is a tool of the gods. Like, being able to play with time and master time, handle time like that, that's really a tool of God. And I've been really trying to sit with that, like, let them really sink into my mind, in the sense of, like, I don't need to respond right now, because how I feel right now is not how I'm going to feel forever. Give things time. The same thing too is things don't always go the way you want them to go when you want them to go your way. That does not mean, though, that it's not going to go your way. It's just a matter of time. Give things time. I had a friend of mine. I admire their tenacity. They wanted a particular job. They're supposed to get this job in Saudi Arabia. And they literally had been interviewing for this job for months. And at one point, the company emailed them and said, you're not getting this job. And this was after he like talked to this side and the other, and they were like, you're not getting this job. A normal person would have been like, wow, okay, I guess I'm not going to get this job. And like, just, they kept going. Like, they ignored all of that shit. And then they were like, I'm going to call and talk to the fucking manager, because you've been talking to me all of this months. Like, you're not going to like not give me this job. I was like, bro, they sent you the email. And he's got the job. It took almost a year, but he got the job. That is like an indomitable sense of will. Like, that's amazing. The only point of reference I have to that is like, I'm being hard. I'm joking. But there was a song I've been mildly obsessed with. I think I've given them, I probably, just by the amount of replays I've played the song on Spotify, they've at least earned a good like $3,000 off of me. Because when I like a song, I will just abuse it. Like, I just over and over and over, I will just loop the song. The song is called Ta Ta Ta, right? And I was driving my daughter to school, and I wanted to hear this song. And so I had my playlist. It was like my Naija playlist, right? And I was like, I played the song. It didn't play. It wasn't it. I could have gone into Spotify and just found the song and hit play, but I was like, oh, so driving, I don't like to do that. So I'd rather just like skip. I kept skipping and skipping. So the song would play, another song would pop up, and I'm like, oh, that's a banger, but that's not what I want to listen to right now, right? I want to listen to this song. And at first I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to like psychically, why not? I'm going to like psychically like think like it's going to be the song. It's going to play the next song. So the next song. And then it didn't work. It didn't like this. It was like another song, play another song. But then I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to keep hitting next until I get to the song. And that's eventually took like 4 or 5 minutes, but eventually I got to the song. Now that's my point of reference, is that the reason why I kept going is because I knew that the song was in the playlist. Can you keep that same energy for anything that you're moving through in life? Like, whatever it is that you desire out of life, can you just ignore the bullshit? Like, ignore all the songs that are popping up, because you know that where you're trying to go is there. It's there. If you want it, just keep going. Because that's what he did. He was like, I'm going to get this goddamn job. Like, he wasn't that like bold about it. Like, he went through some pain. Like, I remember like watching it like, yo, bro, like, that's whatever it is that's wanting you to earn this. Like, maybe try other. And he just kept going. Like, that's wild to me. But like I said, my only point of reference is just trying to find the song. I know it's in the playlist, right? Neville Goddard wrote about this. And I've actually had a couple of videos based on the writings of Neville Goddard where I've said, like, start ignoring what you see. But that idea has been really being reinforced lately, right? Stop, like, just ignore it. If it's not what you want, ignore it, because you will get what you want. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time and persistence, right? Like, you have to know that because you have the desire for something, the outcome, it's linked. I talked about this in the book as well. Desire and outcome are linked. It's in So You're Living in a Simulation. Okay? Go cop the book, guys. But it's linked. I want to listen to the song. I know that if I keep clicking, it's going to pop up eventually. Okay, I had wanted to listen to it now, but it didn't work out that way. But did I give up? No. Now, can you keep that same energy for literally anything you want from life? You guys know with the book, right? How long had I said, like, okay, the book is coming, the book is coming, the book is coming? Like, damn near a year. I just kept going, and now the book is out, and it's doing really well, you know? Like, and it's going to continue to do well. Keep going, but use time. Harness time. Don't let time use you. You can absolutely take a step back and go, you know what, I need to think about this. There's nothing saying that you have to react right away. You have to respond right away. You take your time. Use time. Understand how time works. I have to go and get this. This is going to take me a bit, but I'm going to get there. And then everything else that pops up is just bullshit. It's just the noise. It's just the chaos. Now, how do you own your godhood in the midst of that? Is that knowledge. That's how you own your godhood. It's like when you're like, have you ever seen those scenes where like the whole world's just like falling apart and there's just craziness happening and then there's just one calm motherfucker just like moving through shit? Like, be that. That's how you own your godhood. So stop complaining. Stop judging. Use time. Don't let time use you. All right, I got a dash. Thanks for watching. Woo!